Now, in today's world of the United States, this is what the Hispanic population looks like. Um, there was, starting around 1900, we started to see more and more legal immigrants into the area, especially as cities like Los Angeles and this part of Texas started to grow, Phoenix even. So the economies of this area was starting to grow, so we started to see more Mexican immigration, and really, even today, it's still pretty high. About 170,000 a year come into the United States. So notice, this is not necessarily Mexicans, but just Latino, Hispanic or Latino population percentage by county. So notice right around the border areas, it's pretty high. And then also up here, just because this is where Albuquerque and Taos are, major cities, for example. Notice it's not as great in Mexico or Arizona, and a lot of that has to do with the immigration laws. Uh, but and notice it's expanded into Kansas, up into Colorado, even up into Las Vegas, which you would expect. Up here, again, a lot of uh, jobs, especially in the meat processing, the slaughterhouse industries. Chicken, for example, it's a very, very dangerous job, and chicken processing companies have set up basically a service that will it's the day before the election, so people calling about votes. Sorry about that. So some, like Tyson Chicken and some of the other ones have set up buses that will come down and pick up legal immigrants and take them up and then give them jobs in the meat processing companies up here. And that's why you start to see expansion all the way up into these cities far away from the border. So push factors are those factors that push the population out of Mexico, and pull factors are those factors which pull Mexican, well, not just Mexican, but from Central America in general, uh, populations, immigrants into the United States. So widespread unemployment in Mexico and available jobs in the United States equals, a big push factor out of here and a big pull factor into here. And that's why even today, we still see fairly large numbers of immigrants, both legal and illegal. Excuse me. Um, in 2010 census, about almost 38% of the population of New Mexico, 29% of the population in Arizona was Latino. And in some counties, even more. Here's Los Angeles County, for example, but that's a little misleading because it's I'm sorry, Orange County. That it's this whole area is heavily um, Hispanic or numerically has a lot of people numerically. So I'm sorry, that is LA County. So. But notice up here, Chicago, even on the seaboard, this would be Cubans down here. Or I'm sorry, no, it would be Mexicans over here. Houston, Dallas, you would expect. And then migration change up here. Uh, there's all kinds of reasons for up here. There's a major freeway that goes up through here, and if you follow methamphetamine buses around here, you'll find that a lot of them are near this freeway, and so even the importation of illegal drugs has been a big factor in Mexican migration. But there's a lot of disparities here, culturally, of course, especially in the rural areas. And this goes way back, to the first immigrations when the area was ceded to the United States in 1848. So there was still this discrimination that goes back, 150 years or so. And there's a correlation with poverty. So notice that Native, especially Native Americans, but also Hispanic culture along the border towns and so forth. These are countries with high levels of poverty, but also high levels of immigrant population as well. Now, the initial Mexican migration was mostly due, and it's still true today, to fill labor needs in the U.S. There just weren't enough people to do the jobs. Today, there might be enough people, but Mexican immigration mostly fills the low wage, no skilled jobs. With World War II, there was a big labor shortage because all the white Europeans were fighting in the war. And so this led to what we call the Bracero program, which was a Mexican labor program that went on until 1964, which was basically a way for Mexicans to legally come into the United States to work. And then we got into the maquiladoras, which are actually on the Mexican side of the border, but generally they're owned by U.S. companies. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but usually it's raw materials and semi-finished parts are brought to the maquiladora, where they are assembled, if you will, and then re-exported to the United States, China, and other Japan, and even European countries. And this is all because of what we call the wage rate differential. In the United States, you'd have to pay somebody $10 an hour. In Mexico, you only got to pay them $1 an hour. And we'll get to this in a minute. And that's all because of this, NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. What it does is it increased the integration of the border areas or region. It did away with a lot of the paperwork between the United States, Mexico, and Canada, so goods could move back and forth much more freely. And so the economies of all three countries became very closely linked. Mexico is a big tourist destination. Also, it's a big retiree destination. Costs are much lower, and if you watch House Hunters International, for example, you always see stories about people moving to Mexico just because they can buy beautiful homes on the beach for next to nothing, and so forth. And again, I mentioned this concept of the Twin Cities. Sometimes part of your family will be in the United States, some will be in Mexico, so there's a lot of travel back and forth. And again, just increases this integration of the border area. People move here in general just because of the climate. It's dry. It's got lots of sunshine. Dry in a good way, though. It's lots of sunshine. Initially, a lot of people with respiratory problems moved here. There's a big retiree community, like Phoenix and Scottsdale, for example. A lot of golf. A couple of my uncles retired there just because that's what they wanted to do. They could get a cheap place to live, buy a cheap home in a retirement community, and play golf all day. But they become big growth areas. Southern California, especially in the late 19th century, has grown into what we know it today. But Arizona's grown too. It's one of the fastest growing regions in the country. There was lots of industry and corporate offices here, which helped increase population growth. Aircraft, for example, the aircraft manufacturing companies located here or near here, just because the weather was always good for flying. We do more parts here than aircraft assembly, but the military always still has their bases around here. That's what. So in parts, I mean the electronics. So part of it. So we get what we call this plural society, where it's this mixture of this tricultural mixture. Now, in the Hispanic population is perhaps a little more evident in the northern highlands of New Mexico, in the rural areas, and the lower Rio Grande Valley of Texas, which is especially important because you can grow winter crops there. So highly agricultural, and you need people to pick the crops, and so there's a large Hispanic population there. plus the Hispanic enclaves here in Los Angeles. And then the other part of it is the very large Indian reservations. Okay, we'll stop here and then we'll do NAFTA.